Millionaire disguises himself as a chauffeur to test his rich fiancée's family, but what he discovers breaks his heart. Now he must make a decision that changes everything. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Daniel Matthews stood by the wide windows of his penthouse in Midtown Manhattan, gazing at the city's glimmering skyline. The gentle hum of traffic below blended with the static sound of late-night news on the TV behind him. He was a tall man of 40, with strong shoulders and dark hair just beginning to gray at the temples. His face, etched with both determination and subtle lines of weariness, reflected a life of constant striving. At a glance, one would think he had everything: fame, money, and soon a high-profile wedding. But that evening, as he watched the lights of the city, he felt a weight on his chest that he couldn't ignore. His phone vibrated gently on the sleek marble counter, drawing him away from his silent vigil. The caller ID flashed the name of his personal assistant, John. He hesitated before answering. Lately, the prospect of any news, big or small, felt more like an intrusion than an update. Still, he couldn't entirely disregard it. "Daniel," came John's voice, careful and respectful. "I just wanted to confirm the date for the next board meeting. Are we still set for after the wedding?" Daniel's mind drifted momentarily. The wedding. He was set to marry Victoria Winchester in just 2 weeks. The media had named it the union of two dynasties, his technology empire merging with her family's real estate legacy. On paper, it was perfect. In the countless society magazines scattered across Manhattan's upscale cafes, their engagement photos beamed with glossy perfection. However, doubt had been casting a shadow in Daniel's mind for some time, a persistent worry that was now difficult to ignore. "Let's keep it after the ceremony," Daniel said quietly, pressing a hand against his forehead. "I need a bit of calm before everything hits full speed." He ended the call and turned off the television, trying to recapture the hush of his penthouse. In the reflection of the window, he saw the faintest tremor in his hand. His gut told him that something wasn't right, not about the board meeting, but about Victoria and the wedding itself. The mansion in the Hamptons was already rented. The chefs and staff had been hired for the week-long festivities, and invitations had long since gone out to half of New York's elite. Yet beneath that veneer of glamour, an unnameable tension gnawed at him. Daniel had built his fortune through tenacity and brilliance in the tech sector. Growing up, money had been scarce. His parents divorced when he was 12. His mother worked 2 jobs while his father struggled to rebuild a failing construction business. Young Daniel watched them fight over finances until, eventually, his mother left with a broken heart and almost nothing in her bank account. That memory fueled Daniel's ambition to succeed on his own terms. Over time, he grew wary of people's motives, colleagues, partners, even girlfriends, never entirely certain who genuinely cared for him and who saw him only as a stepping stone to wealth. It was precisely that hard-earned caution that now caused him to scrutinize his fiancée and her formidable family. Something felt off. Victoria, in her early 30s, was strikingly elegant, with honey blonde hair always styled to perfection and a polished demeanor that never wavered, even under pressure. They had met at a charity benefit, a glamorous affair where they were introduced by mutual friends. Within months, they became the talk of Manhattan. Everyone remarked how Victoria balanced Daniel's serious nature with her sparkling social presence. He closed his eyes, recalling a moment at a recent gala. He'd spotted Victoria on a balcony, her back turned to him. She was speaking to her father, Charles Winchester, a powerful man known for his sharp business tactics in real estate. Though Daniel could not make out every word, he noticed their hushed yet intense exchange. When Victoria turned to see him, the surprise on her face was more akin to alarm than delight at her fiancé's arrival. That fleeting reaction planted a seed of doubt in him, and it had been growing steadily ever since. "Am I just imagining things?" he murmured to himself, stepping away from the window and heading toward his minimalist desk. He pulled open a drawer, taking out a thick binder marked prenuptial agreement. His attorneys had insisted on meticulous clauses to protect his assets, but Victoria's readiness to sign without question felt too smooth. Could she and her family be operating on a more cunning level, ensuring that once she and Daniel wed, they could seize control of parts of his empire? A soft sigh escaped him. He wanted love, not a business merger. The fear of being deceived, of giving his heart and trust to someone undeserving, pressed heavily on him. He reminded himself that not everyone was like his past partners, some of whom only desired his money and public image. Victoria had shown genuine warmth at times. She had comforted him during a stressful product launch, shared glimpses of her upbringing that resonated with his own complicated youth. Yet, the rumors swirling around the Winchester name created an uneasy swirl in his mind. As the clock neared midnight, Daniel gently closed the binder. There was no way to fully confirm his suspicions without taking a risk, and if they were false, he might lose Victoria's trust. But if they were true, and he did nothing, he might lose far more. He glanced again at the Manhattan skyline, then dimmed the lights in his apartment. Though he was determined to uncover the truth, he found himself wishing, for the briefest moment, that all of his doubts were simply illusions. Yet the feeling in his chest refused to vanish, leaving him alone with a question he had no immediate answer for. A brilliant early morning sun illuminated Daniel's living room, highlighting every modern contour and polished surface of the penthouse. He was in the middle of finishing a business memo when his phone buzzed. The caller was Henry Braxton, an old college friend whose name Daniel hadn't seen on the screen for nearly a year. They had once been close, studying endless nights, competing for internships in Silicon Valley, but life had drawn them along different paths. He picked up, voice cautious. "Henry, this is a surprise." "It's been a while, Dan," Henry replied, using the nickname only a handful of friends still did. "I heard about your upcoming wedding. Congratulations." Daniel cleared his throat, noticing a tension in Henry's tone. "Thank you. It's a lot of prep, to say the least." "Yes, I'm sure. Listen, I don't mean to pry, but I caught wind of something at a reception last night. Heard Victoria's father in a conversation that sounded questionable." Daniel's heart tightened. He pressed the phone closer. "What kind of conversation?" "There was a hint that Charles Winchester is negotiating with certain investment groups to move funds around, funds supposedly tied to your companies. People are speculating that once you two are married, they'd have enough leverage to, I don't know, maybe claim a portion of your assets or manipulate your shares. No one's certain yet, but it's raising eyebrows in a few circles." Daniel absorbed the words, a chill running up his spine. He tried to keep his tone composed. "You're sure you heard this from credible people?" "I'd never call you unless I thought this was solid," Henry said quietly. "We were friends once, remember? I couldn't stand by and not tell you." Daniel felt a long breath leave his lungs. He'd been half expecting a rumor like this, ever since that uneasy moment at the gala with Victoria and her father, yet hearing it confirmed by Henry made it all the more real. "I appreciate you telling me," Daniel replied. "I'll handle it. Be careful. The Winchesters are powerful, and your reputation is valuable." After the call ended, Daniel paced the living room. With the wedding less than 2 weeks away, he needed to tread carefully. The mansion in the Hamptons was ready to host the myriad of guests arriving soon for the pre-wedding festivities. Everything had been orchestrated for a flawless celebration. Yet behind the scenes, an entirely different narrative seemed to be unfolding. Anxious, he clicked on his laptop and pulled up the news. A few business columns mentioned the Winchesters' interest in new real estate ventures, but there was nothing about a takeover or suspicious deals. The tabloids, for their part, showed gushing headlines like "Tech Mogul Marries Real Estate Royalty," featuring photos of Daniel and Victoria at fancy events. If there was a scheme underway, it was kept well out of the public eye. With the tension mounting, Daniel called his assistant, John, who had been his right-hand man for years. John was loyal, reliable, and knew how to keep a secret when it mattered. "Yes, Mr. Matthews," came John's steady voice. "I need to look into something. The Winchesters might be planning a corporate maneuver," Daniel exhaled, trying to keep his tone calm. "Could you discreetly find out if they've been buying any stakes in my companies, or if there's an unusual activity in the stock market associated with my name?" John didn't hesitate. "Of course, I'll get on it right away. Should I call the legal team?" Daniel paused. "Not yet. Let's keep it within our circle for now. I don't want to alarm anyone unless we have concrete proof." He hung up and sat down at the kitchen table, the hum of the penthouse's air conditioning filling the room. The memory of Victoria's wide smile danced before him. He recalled how she'd once soothed him in his moment of stress, whispering reassuring words in his ear. The woman he knew could not have orchestrated something this manipulative, unless he hadn't truly known her at all. As minutes slipped into an hour, Daniel found himself revisiting his past relationships. He remembered an ex-partner who seemed perfect on the surface, but secretly sold company information to a competitor. That betrayal had been a lesson. Never rely on appearances alone. Yet no matter how cautious he tried to be, he still wanted to believe in genuine love. In a restless effort to ease his mind, he stepped onto his balcony, letting the cool breeze brush against his face. From that height, Manhattan looked peaceful, almost serene, though he knew better. The city was a maze of ambition and hidden agendas, much like the hearts of the people who roamed its streets. He glanced at a framed photo on the living room shelf, a candid shot of him and Victoria laughing in Central Park. Her golden hair caught the sunlight, and her arm was wrapped around his shoulders in an affectionate gesture. He remembered how genuinely happy he had felt in that moment. Now, he wondered if that memory was tainted by illusions. A subtle ring on his phone indicated a message from John. "No immediate evidence, but I'll keep digging. Let's stay on alert." Closing his eyes, Daniel balanced the phone in his hand, debating his next move. He refused to become a paranoid groom who accuses his fiancée without proof. Yet doing nothing felt equally foolish. He had to make a plan, to confirm or dispel these rumors before the wedding day arrived. And that plan, though not fully formed, started shaping itself in the back of his mind as he gazed upon the city that had taught him both triumph and heartbreak. Late that afternoon, Daniel found himself standing in his minimalist office, high above the bustling streets. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in natural light, revealing sleek furnishings in neutral tones. A modern sculpture near the entrance, an abstract piece of polished metal, reflected distorted glimpses of his face as he walked past. He had decided to clear his schedule for the evening, feeling too on edge to entertain the usual parade of meetings and calls. He paced, replaying Henry's warning in his mind. Each new step across the plush carpet fueled a growing unease. Once, when he was younger, he might have brushed off a friend's rumor. But now, at 40, with past betrayals still stinging, he was unwilling to dismiss anything that smelled of deceit. A soft knock sounded on the door. It was Carla, his executive assistant, a no-nonsense woman in her late 30s with sharp features and an impeccable sense of style. She held a stack of folders in one arm and balanced a cup of coffee in the other. "Mr. Matthews," she greeted, pushing a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I have the files you requested on the new software initiative. Should I leave them here?" Daniel motioned for her to come in. "Yes, Carla. Put them on the desk." Carla placed the folders down, then glanced at him, concern flickering in her eyes. "You seem a bit preoccupied. Is everything all right?" He forced a half smile. "Just personal issues. Nothing to trouble yourself over." She studied him for a moment. "If you need anything, professional or otherwise, just let me know." After she left, the office felt emptier than before. He rifled through a few pages of the proposed software expansion, but found it nearly impossible to concentrate. A dull ache settled behind his eyes. The conversation with Henry had triggered memories of past deceptions. In one particularly painful recollection, an old girlfriend had convinced him to invest in her startup, only for him to discover that she'd siphoned funds to prop up a secret gambling addiction. The humiliation of that incident had taught him never to hand out trust easily again. Yet Victoria was different, or at least he had always believed so. They had bonded over philanthropic efforts, hosting charity dinners to support homeless shelters in Manhattan. The warmth he thought he saw in her eyes during those events had convinced him that maybe, just maybe, she was genuine. Now that trust wavered, replaced by a nagging thought. Had she been playing a role all along? As the afternoon slid into early evening, Daniel left the office, deciding that a walk outside might clear his head. The crisp autumn air was a welcome change from the temperature-controlled environment of the building. He strolled a few blocks until he found a small park with scattered benches. An older woman fed pigeons, tossing bits of bread while humming a quiet tune. Her easy contentment contrasted sharply with the turmoil in Daniel's thoughts. He sat on a nearby bench, gazing at the city lights that began to blink on as dusk approached. Against the backdrop of Manhattan's towering skyscrapers, his concerns felt both monumental and strangely insignificant. He considered what it would mean to cancel the wedding so close to the ceremony date. It would cause a media frenzy, overshadow the philanthropic projects he and Victoria had planned, and possibly erode years of careful business relationships. Worse, it could confirm the cynic's belief that he was an eccentric tech mogul who trusted no one. But an even darker fear gnawed at him. If he went through with the wedding without confronting his suspicions, and if those suspicions turned out to be true, he would be betraying himself. Nothing frightened him more than the possibility of repeating old mistakes, ignoring red flags out of desperation for genuine love. A pair of teenagers jogged by, chatting animatedly about weekend plans. He envied their carefree laughter, recalling a time when he, too, roamed these city streets with nothing but optimism for the future. There was a period in his youth when he believed the world was full of possibilities, untarnished by greed or hidden agendas. Now, adulthood had taught him harsh lessons about the duplicity lurking behind polished smiles. Rising from the bench, Daniel took a deep breath and decided to head home. He slipped into the sidewalk crowd, weaving between briefcases and cell phones and half-burned cigarettes on the pavement. The city felt more overwhelming than ever, a sea of lives each carrying their own secrets and ambitions. At the penthouse door, he paused before inserting the key card. He thought of Victoria, picturing her relaxed on the sofa, maybe reading over the wedding itinerary. Would she greet him with a gentle kiss or a suspicious question about where he'd been? He realized he had no certainty anymore. He stepped inside, his reflection in the hallway mirror reminding him of the changes in his face since he first met Victoria. He looked older, more guarded. Feeling an urgent need for clarity, he told himself that the time for hesitation was drawing to a close. He needed to decide on a course of action, something that would either ease his fears or confirm them. A phone call or direct confrontation could give him some answers, but might also raise suspicion. Another, More covert plan began forming in his mind, one that would require greater risk but might finally unveil the truth about the Winchesters. He could scarcely believe he was considering it, but given his track record of heartbreak and betrayal, he felt there was no choice left but to take a leap into the unknown. On a grey, drizzly morning, Daniel arrived at a trendy brunch spot in the West Village for a meeting he had neither arranged nor entirely looked forward to. Victoria had texted the night before, asking if he could meet her father, Charles Winchester, for a friendly chat about the upcoming wedding. The subtext was clear. Charles had a plan, and Daniel was expected to hear it. Umbrella in hand, Daniel stepped inside, shaking the raindrops onto a decorative mat. The restaurant was polished and upscale, with marble-top tables and modern art. He spotted Charles immediately, at a corner table, waving a large hand in greeting. Charles was in his late 50s, robust in build, with silver-flecked hair and a face that wore perpetual confidence. The watch on his wrist gleamed with silent opulence. "Daniel," Charles boomed, rising to offer a firm handshake. "You're looking well." "Sit, sit." They took their seats, and a waiter promptly appeared with menus. Charles declined politely, saying he already had his coffee. Daniel ordered a simple black coffee and waited, curiosity and unease mingling within him. "I hope you don't mind my calling this little get-together," Charles said, leaning back in his chair. "These next couple of weeks will be busy, so I thought it wise for us to touch base about some important matters." "Family matters," Daniel inclined his head. "I appreciate the initiative." Charles's smile held a calculated warmth. "As you know, the Winchesters take pride in how we conduct business, be it personal or professional. I understand you're a man of equal standing in your realm, so I'm sure you get the importance of synergy, especially where large finances and reputations are concerned." Daniel caught the subtext immediately. He responded with careful politeness. "I do believe in synergy, though for me, it's also about transparency. I like to be in the loop." Charles's gaze sharpened slightly. "Well said. Which brings me to a small suggestion. Once you're officially part of the family, it might be beneficial for you to take it easy for a while. Perhaps step back from the daily grind at your tech corporation. You'll be husband to Victoria, after all, and a face for our combined philanthropic efforts. Public appearances, charity events, it'll require a lot of energy." Daniel's brow furrowed. He recognized the tactic, encouraging him to cede some control of his company. If he stepped back, Victoria or Charles could start weaving themselves into the organization's core. "I see. That's quite the suggestion," he replied neutrally. "I only mention it because I know the stress of running a major business. It can really wear you down, and we wouldn't want our new family member feeling overwhelmed. Anyway," Charles continued with a dismissive wave, "it's food for thought. Let me know if you need any help making those transitions." Daniel studied him, trying to keep his expression composed. "I appreciate the concern. I'll consider it." A new hush fell between them as the waiter returned, placing Daniel's coffee on a small saucer. Charles sipped from his own cup, then cleared his throat. "I've also spoken with Victoria about the final wedding details. She mentioned you were partial to a smaller ceremony, but we felt it best to go big. This is a momentous occasion for both families, after all." Daniel's mind flickered back to the rumor Henry had shared about corporate maneuvering. He suspected the extravagance was not just about the wedding, it was about showcasing power, drawing in certain influential circles, maybe forging alliances that would benefit the Winchesters down the line. "I'm not opposed to a big event," Daniel replied, choosing his words carefully. "I just want to ensure we keep the essence of what the wedding is supposed to be about." Charles laughed, a hearty sound that attracted a few curious glances from other patrons. "Essence, yes, but let's not forget we have a brand to uphold, son." A prickle of discomfort ran through Daniel at the word son. a brand to uphold. Was that what their union meant to Charles? Just another brand collaboration? They wrapped up the meeting, exchanging pleasantries. Charles insisted on paying the bill, remarking that soon enough everything would be in the family. With a firm handshake, he left Daniel alone at the table, staring at the half-empty cup of coffee. Outside, the drizzle had turned into a heavier rain. Daniel slipped into the back seat of his waiting car, but as he sank into the leather, he couldn't shake off the heaviness in his chest. Charles's friendly facade had done little to hide the underlying pressure. He clearly intended for Daniel to relax his grip on his company. Before heading back to his penthouse, Daniel instructed the driver to take a detour through a quieter stretch of Manhattan. He needed a moment to reflect. The conversation with Charles hammered home the reality that something was indeed amiss. The Winchesters didn't just want to merge families, they wanted to maneuver themselves into a position that could compromise his corporate independence. He passed by a modest diner with neon lights flickering in the afternoon gloom, a stark contrast to the high-end brunch venue he'd just left. He realized then how far removed he had become from ordinary life, and how easy it was for powerful figures like Charles to orchestrate plans behind polished smiles. Clutching his phone, Daniel scrolled through messages, one from Victoria asking if he was all right, another from an event planner confirming the arrival date for the wedding caterers. He typed a non-committal reply to Victoria, then paused. Deep in his gut, he knew time was running out. He had to decide whether to confront her directly or find a more subtle way to confirm his fears. As he neared his building, an uneasy resolution formed in his mind. He'd never been the type for elaborate schemes, but this time he might have no other choice. The look in Charles's eyes had convinced him that if he didn't act soon, the Winchesters would. By the next evening, Daniel was sitting alone in his spacious living room, every overhead light turned off, relying solely on the ambient glow from the city beyond his windows. He had grown accustomed to spending late nights in partial darkness. Somehow, it helped him think more clearly. On the coffee table lay his laptop, open to the internal email system for his company. The cursor blinked, awaiting a message he was struggling to articulate. He was about to send a memo to John, a request for something unusual, the creation of a fake identity for a part-time driver. Daniel had heard that Victoria's usual chauffeur would be away for medical reasons during the pre-wedding celebrations in the Hamptons. It felt like the perfect window of opportunity to insert himself into the Winchester household, unseen in plain sight. He typed slowly, carefully so as not to betray any detail that might later seem suspicious. The email was brief, a request to arrange all the necessary documents, background checks, and references for a man named James Whitley. He gave instructions that the driver should appear to be from a respectable but humble background, with no ties to Daniel or his corporation. Once done, Daniel reviewed it 3 times before hitting send. His heart pounded. This plan, disguising himself to observe Victoria's family, seemed risky and even dishonest. Yet part of him felt oddly at peace with the decision. The alternative was to confront Victoria or Charles directly with nothing more than rumors. With his personal history of being manipulated, he wanted concrete proof before taking any drastic steps. His phone rang unexpectedly, the screen lighting up with Victoria's name. He answered, trying to maintain a casual tone. "Hey, darling." She sounded cheerful. "I was just checking on you. You've seemed distant lately, and you left brunch with my father in such a hurry." Daniel forced a smile into his voice. "It was a busy day. Your father and I had a good talk, though it's all just wedding stress, I suppose." Her laugh sparkled through the line. "That's completely normal, you know. The wedding is just a little over a week away, and everyone is counting on us to make it spectacular." She paused, voice softening. "Are you all right, truly?" He hesitated. "I will be. Don't worry. We can talk more when we're out in the Hamptons." "Of course," she said. a hint of relief in her tone. "I'll be heading there early next week to oversee final arrangements. Just promise me you'll join me as soon as you can. People will expect us to be there together." "I promise," Daniel replied. Then he added quietly, "I love you, Victoria." "I love you too," she said, almost automatically, and ended the call. He set the phone aside, exhaling deeply. If only he could have felt reassurance in her words. Instead, a hollow sensation clung to him. His suspicions remained, refusing to be quelled by the promise of love. That same night, he met John in a private conference room at his corporate headquarters. It was late enough that most employees had gone home, leaving the corridors silent. John arrived precisely on time, carrying a slim folder. "Mr. Matthews," he greeted, his loyal gaze flicking to the security camera above. "We're good to talk here?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, the cameras only record video in this room, no audio. Just keep your voice low." John set the folder on the table. "These are the documents for James Whitley, including a driver's license, references, and some background details. Everything looks real enough for any casual inspection." Daniel flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening as he took in the fictional biography of his alter ego. He saw a photo of himself, lightly edited so that if one didn't look too closely, they wouldn't suspect it was the same Daniel Matthews who appeared in magazines. There was a new mustache added, slightly receding hair, and a different expression. "Perfect," Daniel muttered, though the word felt strange in this context. "I want you to contact the staffing agency. Give them the reference for James Whitley and see to it that he's assigned to the Winchester's property in the Hamptons." John nodded, a flicker of concern passing over his features. "Sir, may I speak freely?" Daniel closed the folder. "Of course, this is quite a risk. If you're discovered, the media backlash alone could be brutal, not to mention the damage to your personal relationships. Are you sure about this?" Staring at the forged ID photo, Daniel felt the weight of his plan settle on him. "I'm not sure about anything except that I need to know the truth. I've spent too many years second-guessing people's motives. If Victoria and her family have nothing to hide, this will be an embarrassing but harmless stunt. If not," John nodded solemnly, "then you'll have protected yourself before it was too late." They shook hands. Within minutes, John was gone, leaving Daniel in the quiet conference room, surrounded by the hum of the overhead lights. He gathered the folder, slipping it into a locked briefcase. On his way out, he caught sight of his reflection in a glass partition. Dressed in a sleek suit, he looked every bit the successful mogul ready to marry into an influential family. Yet behind the polished exterior, a swirl of uncertainty gnawed at him. By assuming this new identity, he was crossing a moral line, lying to the very people he planned to call family. But if those people were indeed planning a deception of their own, perhaps it was a necessary act of self-preservation. Daniel left the building, stepping into the night air. He realized that the final pieces of his plan were in motion. The next time he set foot in the Hamptons, he wouldn't be Daniel Matthews, billionaire groom-to-be. He would be James Whitley, a humble driver, ready to discover just how genuine his bride and her powerful family really were. Daniel sat in his office one late evening, reviewing the forged documents that identified him as James Whitley. His heart pounded at the sight of his slightly altered photograph, the artificially receded hairline, and the new name typed in bold letters. He knew the day was fast approaching when he'd have to don this identity and slip into the Winchester estate in the Hamptons as a humble driver. Every so often, doubt would flicker across his mind, but he forced it aside, reminding himself that he needed tangible proof of any wrongdoing before confronting Victoria or her family. A low knock at the door signaled John's arrival. Dressed in a neatly pressed suit, his shoulders carried their usual composure, though concern clouded his features. He settled into the chair across from Daniel. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The silence spoke volumes about the gravity of the plan taking shape between them. "So," John said softly, folding his hands in his lap, "I've confirmed everything with the staffing agency. They believe James Whitley to be a real person. The Winchester household has signed off on a temporary driver for the upcoming festivities. You're all set." Daniel exhaled and leaned back in his chair. "I appreciate it. I know this is beyond the scope of what you signed up for, but you're the only one I trust with something like this." A faint smile tugged at John's lips. "I've been at your side through some complicated deals, Daniel. This one just happens to be more personal." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small flip phone, sliding it across the desk. "Use this instead of your usual cell. I've programmed only my number and Carla's, in case you need urgent help. I don't want any trace leading back to you." Daniel picked up the phone, turning it over in his hand. It was simple and cheaply made, so different from the sleek devices his company developed. "Thank you," he said, setting it aside. "What about the legal front? Have we found any new evidence of Charles or Victoria buying shares under the radar?" John shook his head. "Nothing conclusive yet, but they could be doing it through intermediaries. We've seen slight shifts in market movements, but no smoking gun. You might find that proof more easily from the inside." A quiet settled over the office again. Through the tinted windows, the Manhattan skyline glimmered, a testament to Daniel's achievements in technology, yet he felt more vulnerable than ever before. Leaning forward, he lowered his voice, though they were entirely alone. "John, you've known me a long time. Am I making a mistake? Am I letting paranoia run the show?" John's gaze was steady. "Daniel, you're a thoughtful man. You never jump to conclusions without good reason. If your instincts are telling you to proceed, there's likely truth behind them. I don't think you're being paranoid. Cautious, yes, but not paranoid." Daniel considered this. He thought of how John had joined him nearly a decade ago. Back when his tech startup was just beginning to gain traction, John was the one who had watched him negotiate major contracts, the one who had consoled him when early partners let him down or tried to exploit him. If there was a single person in this world who fully grasped Daniel's reluctance to trust, it was John. "What if I discover something that's beyond what I can handle?" Daniel asked, almost in a whisper. "That's where you have people like me," John replied with quiet conviction. "You won't be facing it alone." Daniel nodded, his resolve hardening. He realized in that moment that John was more than just an assistant. He was a mentor of sorts, a voice of reason and steadfast support. This covert plan might be Daniel's own doing, but without John's unwavering help, he wouldn't have been able to pull it off. The seeds of courage had been planted in Daniel's heart long ago, but John's calm presence nurtured them. They spent the next hour ironing out final details. How Daniel would maintain a low profile, what steps he'd take if Victoria or Charles recognized him, and contingency plans if it all fell apart. Daniel scribbled notes on a yellow pad, circling key points. He knew he'd be risking everything, his reputation, his relationship, and possibly major business alliances if he were caught. But after hearing Henry's warning and enduring Charles's veiled threats about easing off work, Daniel believed this disguise was the only way to confirm his suspicions. Eventually, John stood to leave. At the door, he paused, looking back at Daniel with an unreadable expression. "You know how to reach me if anything goes wrong. Try to get some rest before you head out. You'll need a clear mind once you're there." Daniel gave him a grateful nod. As John disappeared into the dimly lit corridor, Daniel felt the weight of the documents in his hands. He recognized, with a pang of mixed relief and trepidation, that the path before him was set. Soon, He would trade his life of affluence for the subdued uniform and responsibilities of a driver. He could only hope that the truth, whatever it turned out to be, would set him free from the web of uncertainties that had plagued him for too long. The following morning, Daniel found himself in his bedroom, staring at a row of custom-tailored suits hanging neatly in the walk-in closet. He reached for one instinctively, a sleek navy piece that had become his go-to outfit for business meetings. But as his hand brushed the smooth fabric, he paused. In just a day's time, he'd be driving out to the Hamptons with far simpler clothing, disguised as James Whitley. The stark difference between these two wardrobes was a vivid reminder of the line he was about to cross. He lowered his arm, turning instead to a suitcase near the bed. Inside lay the well-worn jeans, plain polo shirts, and a low-key black jacket he'd purchased to suit the persona of a regular chauffeur. He ran a thumb over the plain cotton, feeling oddly disconnected from the opulent life he'd built. A pang of apprehension tightened his chest. Soon he would be stepping away from everything familiar, at least for a little while. The phone buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. Victoria. Taking a slow breath, he answered, trying to project a calm he didn't fully feel. "Good morning." "Morning, love," she said, her voice bright. "I'm just calling to confirm. The wedding planner needs you at the Hamptons estate by Wednesday." "That's 2 days from now, right? We're trying to finalize the timeline for the rehearsal dinner." Daniel swallowed. He'd orchestrated a cover story about a last-minute business crisis that would prevent him from arriving until late in the week. "That's the plan, yes. I've got an urgent round of investor meetings I can't miss. But you go ahead, and I'll join you as soon as I'm done." She made a small sound of disappointment. "I understand. I suppose we can't complain about a man who's so dedicated to his career. It's part of what makes you. He forced a light laugh, wishing he could find comfort in her words. "Yeah, that's me. Always working. I'll do my best to wrap up quickly." After a bit more small talk, they ended the call. Daniel exhaled, his heart heavy. He felt a twinge of guilt for lying so seamlessly. But how else could he test what might be happening behind his back? In a way, this was the last act of self-preservation he could cling to. Before leaving his penthouse, he took one final look around. The sleek furniture, the abstract paintings, and the expansive view of Manhattan. This was his fortress, his world. Yet he'd be stepping out of it, symbolically shedding Daniel Matthews and everything that name implied. He locked up the penthouse with a strange sense of finality, as though saying goodbye to more than just his home. Downstairs, the elevator doors slid open to reveal his usual driver, Mark, waiting by the limousine. Daniel approached with a cordial nod. "Mark, I won't be needing the limo today. Take the rest of the week off once you drop me at the office." Mark raised a brow in surprise. "The whole week, sir. Are you sure?" Daniel handed over an envelope with a generous tip. "Yes, I'll be out of the city. Personal business." "You deserve some time off." A hint of a smile crossed the driver's face. "Thank you, Mr. Matthews." Sitting in the back seat, Daniel felt a wave of reluctance. This was one of the last times he would ride in his own limousine before adopting a new identity. The city streets zipped by, full of busy shoppers, tourists snapping pictures, and professionals rushing to their appointments. A pang of nostalgia washed over him. He'd come a long way since his humble beginnings, building a billion-dollar empire that allowed him to travel in style wherever he went. Now, ironically, he would be stepping into the role of the hired help. At the office, he spent the day ensuring operations would run smoothly in his absence. He summoned Carla, who entered with her usual efficient stride. They reviewed pending contracts, the status of current projects, and anything that might require Daniel's personal attention. When they finished, She lingered by the door. "Sir, you still seem restless. I can handle the next few days just fine. Are you absolutely sure there's nothing else we should discuss?" He considered her question carefully. Carla had always been trustworthy, but sharing his plan with more people only increased the risk. He gave her a small shake of his head. "I appreciate your concern, but everything is in place, I promise." She nodded, though apprehension flickered in her eyes. "All right, let me know if you need anything. Good luck with whatever it is you're dealing with." By late afternoon, Daniel left the building with a packed leather duffel bag rather than his usual designer briefcase. He took a taxi, an ordinary yellow cab, not the black luxury car he owned, and directed the driver to a discreet parking garage near the outskirts of Manhattan. There, in a reserved spot, waited a modest sedan arranged by John. Sliding into the driver's seat, Daniel caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. His expression was tense, his eyes reflecting a mixture of anticipation and dread. He pressed the ignition, feeling the engine hum beneath him. This car was far from the sleek machines he was used to, but it suited James Whitley perfectly. Turning onto the highway, Daniel felt the city fade behind him. With each passing mile, he left behind Daniel Matthews, the billionaire tech entrepreneur, and prepared himself for the role of an unassuming chauffeur. His mind buzzed with doubts, but he clenched the wheel, resolved. There was no turning back now. In 2 days, he would enter the Winchester estate not as an honored guest or husband-to-be, but as a simple employee. Part of him wondered if he'd ever truly return to the life he was leaving. 2 days later, a grey sedan rolled up to the gated entrance of a sprawling estate in the Hamptons. The property's tall iron gates were flanked by manicured hedges and a pristine stone wall that spoke of old money. Behind the gates, an elegant circular driveway curved around a central fountain, leading to the main house, a stately mansion of classic white columns and a sweeping veranda. Daniel, now dressed in a plain black suit with no tie, felt a prickle of nerves as he lowered the driver's side window. A security guard leaned forward, scrutinizing him. "Name?" Clearing his throat, Daniel answered, "James Whitley." "I'm here as the new driver for the Winchester party." The guard checked a clipboard. "Yes, Mr. Whitley, you're expected. Please proceed. Park around back where the staff enters." Easing the sedan forward, Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was the moment where all his plans and fears coalesced. Beyond the gate stretched immaculately kept lawns, gardens lined with fresh blooms, and a large stone fountain at the mansion's entrance. He couldn't deny the estate's grandeur, though it felt oddly foreign to him. Normally, if he were arriving as Daniel Matthews, he would have driven in through the main driveway, likely greeted by a butler or house manager. Today, as James Whitley, he was relegated to a back parking area tucked beside the servants' quarters. He found a designated spot near a row of identical black cars, limousines and SUVs awaiting instructions. Exhaling, he turned off the engine. The place was bustling with activity. Catering vans unloaded crates of fresh produce, a team of florists arranged elaborate bouquets on rolling carts, and staff members in crisp uniforms hurried back and forth. Daniel stepped out into the mild Hamptons air, the tang of salt from the distant ocean mixing with the scent of freshly cut grass. He approached a side entrance where a tall woman in her 50s, wearing a neatly pressed navy blazer, stood with a clipboard in hand, directing staff. She glanced at him. "You must be James Whitley. I'm Martha, the house manager. Follow me. We'll get you squared away with your quarters and schedule." He nodded, struggling to mask the air of confidence that naturally accompanied him. "Thank you," he said, forcing a mild tone. They walked down a narrow corridor leading to the staff wing. Sparse walls, bare floors, and muted lighting contrasted sharply with the lush decor he glimpsed through open doors in the main part of the mansion. Eventually, Martha guided him to a small room, a modest cot, a wooden dresser, and a single window overlooking the side garden. "It's not luxurious," she said with a shrug, "but it's where you'll sleep when you're not on duty. You'll mostly be driving Ms. Victoria or running errands for Mr. Charles. Any questions before I show you the rest of the house?" Daniel cleared his throat, carefully lowering his gaze, remembering he was no longer the man who owned penthouse suites and entire floors of office towers. "No, ma'am," he replied, adopting a polite humility. "I appreciate the help." Martha nodded. "Good. We're running a tight schedule. The Winchesters are hosting the first round of guests tomorrow. There's a welcome dinner in 2 days. Rehearsal is the day after. Then the wedding. It'll be a frenzy. Make sure you're always on standby." Following her, Daniel absorbed details of the staff wing, a communal kitchen for quick meals, a small lounge with a couch and a TV, and a locked door that Martha said led to the property's expansive wine cellar. She explained the chain of command. Mr. Charles Winchester outranked everyone, obviously, though Mrs. Victoria took precedence in practical matters for the wedding. Daniel merely nodded, carefully tucking away each piece of information for future reference. As they emerged into the main hallway, Daniel felt a jolt. Standing at the opposite end, engaged in conversation with a cluster of decorators, was Victoria. She wore a fitted ivory blouse and elegant beige slacks, her hair pulled into a sleek chignon. Even from a distance, she radiated poise, yet he noticed a certain edge in her posture he hadn't seen in the city. He ducked back slightly, avoiding direct eye contact. Part of him ached to call out her name, to test if she would recognize him beneath his understated disguise. But reason prevailed. He simply couldn't risk it yet. Martha didn't notice his reaction. She pointed to a hallway leading off to the right. "Service quarters, laundry, and staff lounge are that way. You'll meet some of the house staff there. Just be sure to keep track of your daily schedule. We don't accept tardiness or confusion here." Under normal circumstances, Daniel would have found her tone abrupt, but he merely nodded again. "Understood. Thank you." She handed him a typed schedule, complete with assigned times to drive Miss Victoria around the estate, pick up certain guests from the nearby heliport, and run errands in town. Most entries listed James Whitley as the designated driver. Ironically, that name on paper made his heart twist with both amusement and apprehension. After thanking Martha, he retreated to his room to settle in. The modest space felt confining, a clear step down from his penthouse or even a standard hotel suite. A small mirror hung on the wall. He studied his reflection, hair gelled a bit differently, no designer watch, no tailored suit. In this environment, it was surprisingly easy to vanish into the background. He took a moment to consider how drastically his life had pivoted. Here, in the Hamptons, on the brink of what should have been his wedding celebration, he was instead a stranger among staff. The rules had changed. He was no longer the master of the house, free to stroll into any room or ask any question. He was the help, expected to remain unobtrusive and obedient. As he prepared for the days ahead, Daniel braced himself for the new reality he'd chosen. A path that could either confirm or shatter everything he believed about the woman he was planning to marry. Seated on the edge of his narrow bed, Daniel was running through the daily schedule Martha had handed him when a light knock sounded on the open door. He looked up to see a young man in his mid-20s with sandy brown hair, wearing the same standardized staff attire as everyone else. Black slacks, a white button-down shirt. The newcomer held a friendly grin. "Hey there, I'm Rick," the man said, stepping inside. "I drive the other sedan, mostly for Mr. Charles. Heard you just arrived." Daniel nodded, discreetly clearing his throat. "James," he replied, using his assumed name. "Nice to meet you." Rick motioned to the schedule in Daniel's hand. Pretty daunting at first, huh? This place runs like a machine, especially during big events. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. Appreciating the man's open demeanor, Daniel offered a small smile. Thanks, it's my first time working for a family this prominent. Any tips? The corners of Rick's eyes crinkled in sympathy. Just keep your head down, do as you're told, and don't linger around the family's private conversations. Mr. Charles is intense, and Ms. Victoria, well, she can be demanding, but we're used to it. The real challenge is dealing with the wave of relatives who start showing up. Daniel stored that away as a mental note. I appreciate the heads up. Rick gestured for him to follow. Come on, let's get some coffee in the staff lounge before the real chaos begins. As Daniel stepped into the lounge, he noticed a handful of staff members chatting quietly at a small table. A middle-aged cook with flour on her apron sipped tea, while a young woman in a maid's uniform thumbed nervously through a grocery list. A low murmur of conversation filled the space, tinged with that familiar vibe of busy people snatching a rare moment of rest. The cook, who introduced herself as Clara, gave Daniel an assessing look over the rim of her teacup. So, you're the new driver, huh? Bet you'll have your hands full with Miss Victoria. She has a routine for every single day. She'll want to go shopping or visit the yacht club. Then she'll change her mind and demand the car for something else. Keep your gas tank full at all times. Daniel chuckled softly. Duly noted. Rick poured coffee into a paper cup and passed it to Daniel. Trust me, you want to keep a little caffeine in your system. The Winchesters can go all day, especially with the wedding coming up. Daniel wrapped his hands around the warm cup, feeling grateful for the simple camaraderie. He asked, so it's just the two of us on the driving team? Rick shrugged. Yeah, for now. There's a limo service on call, but it's mostly us who shuttle everyone around. Works fine unless some cousin or auntie shows up unannounced. He rolled his eyes with a grin that suggested it happened more often than not. Observing the group, Daniel felt a growing sense of empathy for these people who kept the Winchester estate running smoothly. They weren't just faceless employees. They had personalities, concerns, a certain pride in their work. He realized he had rarely connected with staff on this level. He'd always been polite, but distant. Now, forced to blend in as one of them, he found himself noticing the small, human details of their everyday lives. Not long after, Martha's voice echoed down the corridor, summoning everyone to their posts. Daniel quickly drained the last of his coffee and followed Rick out. Together, they passed through the kitchen, where the clang of pots and pans mixed with the mouth-watering aroma of fresh basil and simmering sauces. Caterers bustled about, preparing for a gathering later that evening, apparently a small welcome party for out-of-town relatives. As Daniel moved through the halls, he kept an eye out for Victoria, careful not to cross paths with her unless absolutely necessary. When at last he heard her voice drifting through an open door, he ducked behind a large decorative pillar, waiting until she moved on. It felt strange and thrilling to skulk in shadows in his own fiancée's home. He couldn't deny the pinch in his chest whenever he caught a glimpse of her, talking and laughing, reminding him of the life they'd shared back in Manhattan, dinners at upscale restaurants, cozy nights in his penthouse. That life seemed so distant now. Eventually, he returned to the staff area, referencing the schedule for his first official task, picking up some extended family members at the local train station. Before heading off, he double-checked his driver's kit, a notepad with instructions, a discreet earpiece for radio communication, and the keys to one of the black sedans. Rick gave him a thumbs up for luck. Roughly 20 minutes later, Daniel started the car and pulled onto the coastal highway, the ocean breeze drifting in through the slightly open window. Adapting to the staff routine wasn't as straightforward as he'd assumed, but he found a quiet determination in himself. He'd come here for answers, And the first step was blending in seamlessly, making sure no one suspected his real identity. Despite the gravity of his mission, a small part of him relished the chance to experience this world from a completely different vantage point. On Daniel's second full day at the estate, the rhythms of the staff began to feel familiar. He woke early, changed into the standard black slacks and collared shirt, and reported to the garage. His morning was spent chauffeuring a distant uncle to a nearby marina where he was meeting a yacht broker. Then he drove an elderly aunt to an upscale boutique in Southampton, listening to her complain about the humidity the entire way. By mid-afternoon, he returned to the staff lounge, sweating slightly beneath his neatly pressed shirt. As he refilled his water bottle from a cooler in the corner, the door swung open and a woman stepped inside. She wore a simple floral sundress, her posture uncertain, as though she didn't quite belong in either the main house or the staff wing. Her eyes landed on Daniel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Sorry," she said softly. "I was just looking for the kitchen. I'm Rachel Winchester." Daniel's pulse quickened. He recognized her name. Rachel was Victoria's cousin, the one who rarely appeared in society magazines and was rumored to be something of a black sheep in the family. She seemed younger than Victoria, probably around 30, with expressive hazel eyes and wavy brown hair. Unlike Victoria's meticulously polished style, Rachel had a gentle, almost bohemian grace about her. He forced a polite nod, remembering his role. "Hello, Ms. Winchester." "I'm James, one of the drivers. The kitchen is just down the hall, third door on the left." Rachel's cheeks tinted pink. "Right, thanks. I must have taken a wrong turn." She paused, studying him for a beat. "I haven't seen you around before. Did you just start working here?" "Yes, ma'am," Daniel replied, keeping his tone subdued. "I'm new." She gave him a sympathetic smile. "Well, welcome to the chaos. These family gatherings get pretty intense." He didn't know how to respond without sounding suspicious, so he simply nodded. Rachel turned to leave, then hesitated. "Actually, do you happen to know if there's a space where I can paint? I'm an artist. Sometimes, in the middle of all the noise, I need a quiet corner." Daniel thought quickly. Martha had mentioned an older carriage house near the edge of the property, used mostly for storage. "There's a carriage house outside the west garden. Might be empty enough for you." Rachel's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you, James, really." She stepped out, leaving Daniel in the lounge, water bottle in hand. He stared at the closed door, an unexpected warmth in his chest. Rachel's demeanor contrasted sharply with the rest of the Winchesters he'd met. No haughtiness, no thinly veiled demands. He recalled old rumors that she'd stepped away from the family's real estate business to pursue art full-time. Because of that, relatives had labeled her impractical. If that were the case, Daniel suspected she'd be the only Winchester who might treat him, a lowly driver like a human being. Later, as he parked the sedan by the back entrance, Clara the cook spotted him and waved him over. "We could use some help carrying groceries," she said. "Big dinner planned for tonight." He followed her to a delivery van, hauling boxes of produce. Another staffer, Mark the gardener, joined them. While placing crates of lettuce and tomatoes on a wheeled cart, Clara muttered, "I wish these Winchesters could stick to a menu. They keep changing their minds. Last night I was told to prepare a Mediterranean spread. Now they say they want a New England seafood feast." Mark chuckled. "Keeps us on our toes, eh?" Daniel offered a small smile, but his thoughts drifted to Rachel. She'd seemed out of place in her own family's estate. He wondered if she was truly the anomaly within the Winchesters, someone who valued genuine connections and creative pursuits over money and power. It was a stark reminder that no family was entirely one thing. As the afternoon wore on, Daniel prepared to drive Victoria into town. According to the schedule, She wanted to visit the local spa, followed by a private fitting at a bridal boutique. Heart pounding, he steeled himself to maintain composure in close quarters with his fiancée, all while pretending to be a stranger. She emerged from the house wearing a chic lavender blouse, her blonde hair in a sleek ponytail. Sliding into the back seat, she hardly glanced at Daniel, absorbed in her phone. "The spa is on East Main. Take the scenic route, please. I need a bit of air before dealing with that place," she said. "Yes, ma'am," Daniel replied quietly. Pulling away, he caught a glimpse of Victoria in the rearview mirror. She looked beautiful, but her expression was tense, almost annoyed. The tension wasn't directed at him specifically. She barely acknowledged his presence. That realization cut deeper than he expected. They drove in near silence. As the sedan wound through picturesque streets lined with oak trees and quaint shops, Daniel recalled earlier, happier drives with Victoria. Back in Manhattan, they'd share jokes or plan their future over lattes in the car. Now, she was a distant passenger, preoccupied with text messages and notifications. He felt a pang of sadness, but also a surge of determination. If she could so easily disregard him now, perhaps it meant she was truly different behind closed doors. Upon reaching the spa, Victoria glanced up. "Wait here," she said curtly, exiting with her handbag in tow. As Daniel watched her disappear inside, he couldn't help but think about Rachel's gentle concern, the staff's camaraderie, and the swirl of secrets he was on the verge of uncovering. Surrounded by potential foes, he realized that allies might be found in the most unlikely corners of this lavish estate. But he also knew that forging any true connection under a false identity was a precarious venture. Later that evening, the mansion buzzed with rising energy. Extended family members, business associates, and close friends converged in the ornate foyer for a semi-formal gathering. Daniel, dressed in the same plain black suit, stood near the front entrance, keys in hand, ready to drive anyone who needed transportation. He watched the arrivals from a discreet distance, reminding himself that he was supposed to be invisible. Suddenly, Charles Winchester's booming voice cut through the lively chatter. "Where is that new driver? James, is he here?" Daniel stepped forward, heart pounding. "Yes, sir." Charles beckoned him with an impatient wave. "Come with me. I need you to run an errand." He followed Charles down a hallway into a small side room that functioned as a private study. The decor was a study in opulence. Mahogany bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, dark green walls illuminated by a chandelier overhead. Charles rifled through a desk drawer, pulling out a slim envelope. "Take this to the address listed on the front. It's a property agent's office down in East Hampton. Tell them it's from Charles Winchester and bring back any paperwork they give you." "Understood?" Daniel sensed something guarded in Charles's eyes, a glint that hinted at secrecy. He nodded. "Yes, sir, right away." As he turned to leave, Charles cleared his throat. "And, James, a word of caution. This is confidential business. Don't go snooping around or you'll find yourself out of a job. Understood?" The challenge in Charles's stare felt like a dare. Daniel bowed his head slightly. "Understood, mister." Winchester. He left the house through the staff entrance. Envelope tucked safely in his inside pocket. The night air was cool against his face. While it could be a mundane real estate transaction, the clandestine nature piqued his suspicion. Perhaps this would lead him to the first concrete evidence of the Winchesters' plan to manipulate his, or rather, Daniel Matthews' corporate assets. He started the sedan and headed down the long driveway. Once on the main road, he flipped on the interior light briefly to glance at the envelope's front. No name, just an address. The distinct handwriting looked more like a scrawl than elegant script. He considered opening it, but doing so risked leaving signs that could raise suspicion. He'd have to be more careful. After a 20-minute drive under starlit skies, he arrived at a modest office building. Most suites were dark, but one on the ground floor glowed with fluorescent light. The glass door bore a painted sign, "Long Island Coastal Properties." Daniel entered, finding a lone receptionist behind a cluttered desk. She looked up, blinking with mild surprise. "May I help you?" "I'm delivering this, from Charles Winchester." He set the envelope before her. Her eyes flicked from him to the envelope. "Wait a moment." Slipping into a back office, she left Daniel alone in the reception area. He scanned the walls. Pictures of beach houses, farmland, and new developments covered the bulletin boards. A few real estate brochures were spread out on a coffee table. Moments later, the receptionist returned, carrying a sealed folder. "You're to take this back. And Mr. Winchester said you should give him this." She handed Daniel a handwritten note on stationery. Daniel tucked everything under his arm. "Thank you. Have a good night." On the drive back, curiosity gnawed at him. What if these documents contained something about his own properties or shares? He fought the urge to pull over and inspect them. If he risked it and Charles found any sign of tampering, Daniel's entire plan could collapse. Better to keep his cover intact a little